welcome to this new video for my channel, The Mental Traveler. I'm Caro Herrera and today I'm going to be talking about a story called The Great Gatsby. I shall be talking about the book, which was written by American author F. Scott Fitzgerald and published in 1925, as well as of three of its adaptations. The one from 1974 starring Robert Redford, Mia Farrow, Sam Waterston, Bruce Dern, and Karen Black. A made-for-TV film from the year 2000 starring Toby Stephens, Mira Sorvino, and Paul Rudd. And the 2013 adaptation starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Carey Mulligan, Tobey Maguire, Joel Edgerton, Isla Fisher, Jason Clarke, and Elizabeth Debicki. Before I begin though, let me just warn you that this will be a video with spoilers because I just can't feel like I can make justice to this classic in my review without going into really thorough details about it. So beware. I'm pretty sure that I must have first learned about The Great Gatsby back when I was around 16 because I loved Robert Redford ever since I was a teenager, and so I was watching all of these movies that I thought I would like with him in them, and The Great Gatsby seemed like one that I might enjoy, so I decided to check it out. And well, back then I'd never seen anything like it, so I was instantly caught in its spell. I love period dramas, I love how romantic it was. And I remember that I bought the movie almost instantly, and I saw as many adaptations as I could get my hands on, but I'm only gonna mention the ones that I enjoy the most. And then when I was around 18, an ex-boyfriend gave me the book, and that's when I first read it, and I still have that copy. And I read it back then, but it wasn't until last month that I finally sat down and really read it for the first time, because now that I'm a more mature person, I could really appreciate everything that was going on. And as to Robert Redford's film, well, I still love it, and I see it from time to time. So I actually thought that it was high time that I reviewed this famous classic in my channel. This story is set in 1922, and it begins when Nick Carraway, the novel's narrator, moves to New York to become a bonds salesman. He moves to this small house next to the mansion of a really rich and mysterious man called Gatsby, who likes to throw big, loud parties that fill his house with strangers more than once a month. And these celebrations are so lavish that they are the perfect embodiment of what the Jazz Age was all about. Nick sometimes hangs out with his cousin Daisy and her husband Tom, who are this married couple whose wealth comes from old money. Tom even invites Nick one afternoon to hang out with his mistress, the wife of a poor mechanic. As the story progresses, the lives of all these characters intertwine when it is discovered that Gatsby and Daisy were sweethearts when they were younger. They met when she was 18 and he was about to go off to fight in the Great War, but then the secret comes out that Gatsby actually comes from a poor background. He asks Daisy to wait for him, confident that he will manage to become a wealthy man for her. But in the end, after he goes off to fight in Europe in World War I, Daisy marries a man from her same station in life, Tom Buchanan. Despite the fact that Gatsby is broken-hearted that Daisy marries another, in the end he realizes that he still loves her and she is the only woman for him, which is why he becomes a bootlegger, among other things, in an attempt to be really wealthy and able to give Daisy the life to which she is accustomed to. And so when we jump back to 1922, Gatsby manages to meet Daisy again, and when this happens they once again become lovers. But things don't go as planned because in the end Daisy is unwilling to leave her husband, but Gatsby never realizes this because of a bittersweet twist of fate. We learn all of these things to Nick, who ends up befriending Gatsby and becomes his closest friend during the last weeks of the latter's life. I give The Great Gatsby a 5 out of 5 stars review and highly recommend it for several reasons. It is my favorite Fitzgerald book, and the writing style is just straightforward and yet very elegant and bittersweet and romantic. It's like nothing I'd ever come across in any other book. And even though it's a short novel, it conveys such powerful messages from what's the thin line between love and obsession, to false hopes, wanting to achieve the American dream by becoming rich, and yet living a hollow life once you achieve your ambitions, because you will always want more. I am fascinated by the way the author presented the American dreams and the perils that it involves undertaking this ambitious pursuit. But I also like The Great Gatsby because it was my introduction to the Jazz Age. So I am thankful to it for introducing me to the Roaring Twenties. And as a history lover, I love that it is a period drama and that adaptations of it try to make us understand what it must have been like to listen to that music, wear that kind of clothing. And then it's fascinating that it shows what people from the lost generation were doing, trying to escape the ghosts from that war. But yeah, getting back to the plot of the book and its characters. When I was younger, I was swept away by the love that Gatsby had for Daisy, and that was my favorite part of the story. And it still is, but now that I'm older, I wouldn't really classify Gatsby's feelings for Daisy just as straightforwardly as love. It's not as simple as that. There was obsession in there as well. And before I used to think that Gatsby only wanted to become rich because of Daisy. But now it's clear to me that he was always ambitious. And that in a way, he saw Daisy as the key to becoming part of the aristocracy of America. Just becoming a new rich man. He wanted the benefits and the glamour of actually belonging to a family of money from generations past. He wanted old money. He didn't want to be considered as an upstart. And that just makes me want to really analyze his character in a class or something one day. To get into his mind and think about his motivations and his decisions, his actions and illusions and train of thoughts in detail. But yeah, I mean, I still really love Gatsby. He's my favorite character in the story. And I still do find something romantic in the way he clung to Daisy. But while I used to dislike Daisy because of what she did to Gatsby, I don't anymore. I don't like her, but I can understand why she behaved the way she did. I just think that Gatsby's love for her overwhelmed her, and she just didn't know how to deal with it, how to cope with such strong feelings from a man, and she didn't like to be pressured, and it was just too much to ask of her to be put into this pedestal by him, to be considered this perfect being when she knew she was flawed, and she was an insecure girl as well. I also find her interesting because there is a rational side to her. She does choose, even though it pains her and everything, she chooses Tom Buchanan twice, her husband, because he brings security, because he is the husband that society accepts for her. Sure, maybe because they've built a family together and they have history together, but she knows that he's unfaithful to her, and yet the second time she still decides to remain with him. And all of this leads me to conclude that subconsciously or consciously, Daisy prefers above all else the security of wealth that old money brings her over everything, even Gatsby's love. And I'm not judging her for this. It does make me feel bad for Gatsby. But in the end, I think now that he loved more the idea of her, this phantom Daisy that he had created, an idea to which he clung to, like a drowning man must do to a rat in the middle of a stormy sea, rather than really connecting with the real Daisy. So yeah, it would have been impossible for Daisy to live up to his high expectations of her. And in the end, I'm almost intrigued to imagine what would have happened if she had chosen Gatsby that first or the second time, and to see how far the illusion of being happy would have lasted for them. It makes me feel a bit cynical to be talking this way, but also it's realistic, I think. At least that's the perspective I got from my second real reading of The Great Gatsby. But yeah, I don't think that ending would have been as poetic if they had stayed together. I mean, the memory of what they once had and what they thought they could have had would become ruined because of their present problems when they had to deal with reality. And if Gatsby was someone who pursued illusions and Daisy wasn't really that mature, I don't know, I want to read some fanfiction right now to see if someone can come up with a way in which things might have worked out for the best for them to if they had run away together. But yeah, in the end, as to the real ending of the book, I think that Gatsby died the way he chose to live, stubbornly clinging to the illusion that Daisy would one day be his. And even if Daisy's future with Tom wasn't perfect, at least she made a decision to stay with him. So I must respect her decision. But yeah, if I was to judge them, I would think that both Daisy and Gatsby did wrong regarding fitting false hopes to the other one, meaning that Gatsby should have told Daisy from the start that he was poor, and she shouldn't have pretended that she would choose him either the first time or the second time that she was given the chance. Sure, maybe she fooled herself into thinking that she would give up everything for Gatsby, but also in the end, again, I think that she was realistic deep down and she knew that wealth was the most important thing for her. But yeah, and Gatsby maybe also even recognized this of her at one point, but he was just so stubbornly clinging to his false hope that she was a perfect woman out there for him. Oh, it's all just so complicated. Again, I do think that Daisy loved Gatsby, but her love was different from his love for her, and it was a different love than the one that he would have wanted or that he thought that she was giving him. Because in the end, Gatsby only wanted her, and in a way, and she had space in her heart for other things than only him. Also, another point that I want to mention is that having Nick being the narrator of the story, before I didn't like this because I really wanted to be present every single time that Gatsby and Daisy were together. Something similar used to happen to me when I was reading Wuthering Heights, and then I would start to think that maybe Nick was an unreliable narrator and stuff. And that's why I loved the movie adaptations so much, because we actually got to see what Gatsby and Daisy might have been doing behind closed doors when they were alone. But in the end, something makes me feel that Nick was really honest, maybe because he mentioned that himself. But I don't think he was an unreliable narrator. I think he was very objective and yet subjective in the sense that he sees the flaws and the good things about everyone and he points them out. Even if they're his cousin, his best friend maybe, the woman he's sort of falling in love with and stuff. Anyways, as to the movie adaptations, the 1974 movie will forever remain my favorite version for several reasons. Because it was my introduction to the story, then because it's a very faithful adaptation, and whenever I read the book I picture its actors and the characters' roles, but also because of Robert Redford, and because I feel that it portrays what the 20s were really like much better than other adaptations. I also like the fact that Francis Ford Coppola was a screenwriter, and the scenes between Gatsby and Daisy that are in the novel nonetheless ring very true in my opinion with the tone of the book. As to the 2013 one, okay, so I love the director and the cast is good and it looks very nice and the music is great, even if it isn't very faithful to the era. So yeah, I do like it and it has some good performances, but in the end I think it's just way too over the top. I always feel like they grabbed a fairly straightforward plot dealing with a man's hard actions and reasonings, and they hit it all away with big musical spectacles, location, and it's all just very overwhelming and it distracts from what I think is the true message of the story. And as to the 2000 TV film, I don't think this is a very good adaptation, and from what I recall, I remember thinking that Paul Rudd always looked annoyed to be in it. But I like it because it's sweet and because I like the handsome Toby Stephens, who also happens to be Maggie Smith's son. And I can't recall if I saw him first as Gatsby or as Heathcliff, that 2006 production of Jane Eyre. But I like him and I like to see his interpretations of these two very romantic, famous male characters in literature. Anyways, very obvious it didn't have a very big budget, but compared to the other two, and sometimes it didn't even feel very true to the era costume-wise and such. But I recall that one of the things that annoyed me the most was that they showed Gatsby and Daisy making love before he went off to fight in the war. I thought this wasn't true to the story, and I think they showed the same thing in that 2013 version. But because I didn't get the impression from the 1970 movie that they had slept together when they were younger, it angered me that they were sacrificing their initial pure youthful feelings in order to appeal to a modern audience. I didn't have a problem with them making love when they reunited, but then, during my most recent reread of the book, I discovered a paragraph that makes me swallow back my words because, from what I understood, I think that they indeed slept together before Gatsby goes to fight in Europe. I'm not as upset about it anymore though, because it's presented, it makes me really step into both the lovers' shoes, and I feel like I get why they both did it. Daisy was swept off her feet by Gatsby's intensity and because he made her believe that he wasn't as poor as he really was, and Gatsby implies something to explain this action along the lines of, I took her when I had no right to kiss her hand, but I've felt married to her ever since. Again, I'm not judging this, I'm only saying that I think I understand where he was coming from regarding this action of his. Anyways, for the moment, I believe that this is all I have to say about The Great Gatsby. Please let me know if you enjoyed my review of it or not, as well as what are your own thoughts to this story and its adaptations, because I would love to talk about it all with you. In the description box below, you can find a link to the book's Goodreads page, as well as a link to all of the adaptations I mentioned and reviewed, as well as a link to all of the adaptations I reviewed. Anyways, I'm Caro Herrera, the Mental Traveler, and I hope you have a wonderful day wherever you are in the world. I'll be seeing you soon. Goodbye!